And want to just go ahead and say thanks, everyone, so much for being here. You are more than welcome to have your screen on or off, whatever you're most comfortable with. We will do a little bit of interacting with each other later, and so I'd love it if you feel comfortable putting your screen on during that time when we're discussing some of these topics. Those of you that need a foster parent verification form, so you're using tonight as relicensing hours, in your email, there's an attachment, and I would encourage you to go ahead and print that if you haven't already, or at least pull it up so you're familiar with what the questions are that you'll have to fill out. When we meet virtually, Bridge Life isn't able to offer the certificates of attendance. And so instead, that foster parent verification form serves as proof that you were part of this training. So you can print that, you can fill it out, and then you would submit that directly to your relicensing specialist for credit for tonight's training. We also want to make sure that everybody knows that the 11th annual Superhero 5K is coming up. It's on February 5th, and that is a foster care awareness event. And so we kind of lean into the running community to try to raise as much awareness as we possibly can that we recognize not everybody is called to be a foster parent, but we think there are a lot of amazing people in our community that would sign up to do that if they knew of the need. And we know that there are a lot of people also who can support in a variety of ways. So on February 5th, we host a 5K and a 1-mile fun run at Nathan Benderson Park. I will send all of you the flyer for that tonight after our training with a 50% off coupon, because we would love for as many foster and adoptive families as possible to join us on that Saturday. Well, Shaylee, thank you so much for being with us again tonight. Shaylee, if you were at our December gathering, she was our speaker, and we had such great feedback. And so she agreed to be with us again tonight and talking about a really important topic that I know anybody who's parented any kind of kid from anywhere for any amount of time has dealt with. So we're super excited to hear from you tonight. And I would ask that you just give us a little bit of an overview of what Chosen is, who you serve, the kind of family that you're looking to help. And then we would love for you to launch right into tonight's training session. So thanks so much for being here.
Yes, thank you for having me. You guys may also see Kim Miller on your screen. She's from Chosen. So Kim, if I don't describe this well, feel free to unmute and add to it. I am the program manager for Florida for Chosen. Chosen is an organization that wraps around foster parents, adoptive parents, biological parents, kinship parents, any family that has been impacted by the child welfare system. We provide parent education, which you guys are going to get a glimpse of tonight. We can help you find a therapist if you need help finding a therapist. We help families get connected with community resources, but you guys have like the best in the state right here with Bridge of Life. So I reference the website often. You guys are so blessed to have that. We love to serve families who are just starting out or families who have been parenting for 30 years. One of my most recent clients has been a parent longer than I've been alive, but he recognizes that maybe there are some things that I could change in the way that I parent. And everything that we teach is connection attachment based. I am a TBRI practitioner. So I am all about TBRI. I live it and breathe it personally and professionally. If you weren't here last month, then you may not know that I have 6 kids and 4 of them were adopted from foster care. So throughout what we're going to learn tonight, my own experience is sprinkled all over it because this is something that we deal with in my family pretty frequently. So if you guys have any questions about what Chosen does or how to get connected with us, I would love to chat with you more about that. But let's get started for now. I think that Jody sent out a little glimpse of what we're going to talk about. We are talking about lying and confabulation. Does anyone know what confabulation means? Okay, so I've taught this.
It's
Oh, go ahead.
uh, it's when a child makes up an untruth, but in their head they truly believe it to some
Yeah.
degree.
Yeah. So we're going to watch a video that will better explain it, but that is the gist of it. And I'm really impressed because I've taught this dozens of times and only twice has anyone known what confabulation meant. The first time was an attorney that I serve, and the other time was a bus driver. And she said, I hear confabulation all the time. So thank you for answering that. I forgot to mention, this is my home, and my dog, who I haven't heard all day, is whining. So you may hear her. Also, I have 6 children. So at some point in this training, you will likely hear my children too. Okay, so what are our goals of this training? We want to understand what the typical child development of lying is, because lying is developmentally appropriate at certain stages. It's to understand how complex developmental trauma affects development, to understand confabulation, and to connect how behavior that looks like lying may actually be distorted thinking. And I wouldn't leave you without telling you how to address these issues at home. So let's talk about typical childhood development. When our kids are about 2 to 3 developmentally, I want you to think developmentally in all of this. Don't think you're neurotypical 2 and 3-year-old only. We want to think about parenting the stage, not the age. So if you have a 6-year-old that's more like a 3-year-old, they may be telling these primary lies. And these are designed to conceal transgressions, but fail to take the mental state of the listener into consideration. You know that they are not telling the truth. And sometimes it's kind of funny because you're like, do you really think I'm that stupid? You think I wouldn't see through this? When they're developmentally around 4, they will start telling lies that are more plausible and geared towards the listener's mental development. And then 7 to 8 developmentally, the lies are more consistent with known facts and follow-up statements. Now, parenting the stage, not the age, one of my favorite things to say. If you work with me, you hear me say it all the time. You may have a 16-year-old who developmentally is more like an 8-year-old, and they are going through this. So it's important to think about what was happening in your child's life during those developmental years. If your child was experiencing abuse, neglect, or trauma, their brains were not able to experience the proper developmental trajectory. So you may have an 8-year-old who is more emotionally like a 4-year-old. So he's experimenting with lying. You need to help your kids walk through this stage of development so that they can get through this stage of development. We always want to model the importance of truth telling, and I'm going to share with you some ways that I do this with my family. But first, here is a fun video that will help you understand what confabulation means. Let me make sure I shared my volume. I did.
No one likes a liar. When we think someone is lying to us, we may feel annoyed, insulted, or hurt. How could they think that we're dumb enough to believe their lie? Or maybe we feel betrayed. Or perhaps we did believe what they told us, and now that we discovered that it wasn't true, we feel as if we've been manipulated. But here's the thing. Oftentimes what looks like a lie and sounds like a lie isn't a lie in the traditional use of the word. There could be multiple legitimate brain-based reasons you're getting information out of someone that's incorrect. Responding to them as if they're intentionally lying to you and punishing them is essentially punishing them for something that's out of their control, and that doesn't help anyone. In this video, we'll talk about one of the more common brain-based reasons that you may find yourself in a situation with someone who appears to be lying to you, but isn't. In fact, they could be doing something that all of our brains do: confabulation. I often work with people who have a fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, or FASD, but today we're going to learn about ideas that apply to everyone, regardless of whether or not they have a developmental disability. Confabulation happens when your brain fills in the blank as you're remembering something. Like I said, all of our brains do this filling in without us even knowing it. This is because our memories are imperfect, and so the brain lends us a hand by confabulating missing details. We don't know when we're confabulating because it feels as if we're accessing a normal, intact memory. Most of us experience memories as if a film is playing in our head. Each time we remember it, it feels as if it's the same film that we've watched many times before. We often feel as if we're there in the memory, reliving the moment, and so it makes sense that most of us trust our memory. But the truth is, neuroscience research shows that each time we remember something, our brains distort it. And if there's no memory in place, our brains will often confabulate rather than letting us worry about missing details. So why am I talking about the flaws in everyone's memory? Because I want you to know that memory for everyone is fragile, inaccurate, and easily distorted, and none of us are the exception to this. And remember, people with FASDs tend to have additional memory problems on top of the ones that everyone else has. So if a child is put in a situation where memories are demanded, their brain may begin to fill in the blanks. When it works, it can be a helpful tool, but for kids or people with FASDs, the confabulation isn't always correct, but it feels correct, just like confabulation feels correct when we do it. So how do we think it must feel to be accused of lying when we're actually just confabulating? It's probably confusing, frustrating, and in some cases, it would feel unfair. I see it all the time. And if we're constantly telling people who are confabulating that they're lying, they may not have an accurate idea of what lying really is, because we've been giving them inaccurate words to describe what's happening.
Okay, I just want to stop for a second and point that out. If we are telling our kids that they are lying when they are confabulating, then we are giving them the wrong definition of lying. And so they don't quite understand. I am telling the truth, and they don't know what we mean when we say you're lying. He also said, remember that they believe their version of things just as much as you believe yours.
We say things like, why did you lie to me? Why didn't you tell me the truth? No wonder they may get defensive. They trust their perception just as much as we trust ours. Okay, so confabulation is when the brain fills in the blank with what feels like a normal memory. But people with FASDs and other developmental disabilities may be more likely to engage in confabulation, not just because of their memory issues, but because of multiple struggling cognitive skills. We should note confabulation is just one of many different things that can make a situation appear as if someone is lying to you when they aren't. So even if you're sure that the person isn't confabulating, you should explore other possibilities before accusing someone of lying. If this is something that you want us to talk about in more detail, please leave us a comment and let us know. A big part of addressing confabulation is acceptance, which is part of the neurobehavior model developed by Diane Malbin. Whether we're talking about someone with FASDs, developmental disabilities, or just kids who have a lot of brain development left to do, we can expect that confabulation will happen. We can try many different proactive strategies to prevent confabulation, such as using visuals when communicating or giving time to process. But the reality is, confabulation may always happen to some degree. It's really important not to allow these situations to be stressful. Ongoing stress, especially about things that we have no control over, can be traumatic and damaging to our relationships. Now guys, I'm not saying that intentional, planned out lying never happens. It does. But because so many other things could be going on, my personal approach is to assume the best. That means that if a client is giving me information that I know isn't true, I need to be thinking about the supports that they need. And even if they are intentionally lying, perhaps they just don't know what else to do. So my focus should be less on the fact that they shouldn't be lying to me and more on how I can help prevent this from happening in the future.
So
I hope that you found this.
He's more concerned about finding the reason behind the behavior, because there's always a reason behind the behavior. Okay, whoops. All right. So in just a second, I want you guys to start thinking about this. And then I think we'll just have a group discussion here, Jody. I think that's a good idea. Okay. So think about, and then if you're comfortable, I want you to share a time when you may have confabulated. And then we're going to talk about a time when our child may have confabulated. So I would never ask you to do something that I'm not willing to do. So I'm going to share a time that I confabulated. I went on a cruise with my whole family a few years ago, and we're eating dinner, and I told this story about my childhood. And I have two older sisters, and they both looked at me and said, "Shaylee, you weren't even alive when that happened." And I said, "Yes, I was." And I told them the details. And then they pull my mom in and they say, "Mom, tell her she wasn't even alive." My sisters are 5 and 10 years older than me. And my mom said, "You were not alive. That was not your story." But at some point in my life, I had heard this story and I stored it in my brain as my own. And you could not have convinced me that this was not my story, but I confabulated. Another time that we sometimes confabulate as adults is if we have a disagreement with someone. So if I had a disagreement with Kim, I might go to Jody and give her my version, which would probably make me look a little better. And Kim might go to Jody and give her version that might make Kim look a little better, because in our brains, we're a little better, right? So that's how sometimes we confabulate as adults. If anyone is willing to share, think about a time when maybe you have confabulated.
Well, I will go. And I don't know that it's necessarily confabulation, but I was just talking with a friend about this recently. I had a very negative experience as a high school athlete, and I ended up quitting the basketball team. And now, as a parent of many teenagers, I hear them come home and talk about, this teacher or this friend or this. And I'm always kind of like, what's really going on there? Like, surely, And so, not that I don't believe my kiddos, but I know that they're bringing into their story kind of their personal opinion and something they didn't really like. And so it's caused me to think back on, okay, when I was that high school athlete and I was negative about that coach, what was my part in it? Like, it may not have been the best experience, but now I'm like, I was also a teenager, and so I may not have remembered it or experienced it in exactly the way that it was actually happening to me.
Yes, but if you were a child and I was an adult and I said, "Jody, that's not how it happened, you're lying," you would have thought, "I'm not lying. This is exactly how it happened," because that's how your brain processed it.
Right.
Anybody else want to share? Pam? I won't call you out, but I just saw that you joined. Okay, what about your kids? Maybe it's easier to say, "Well, my kid confabulated when." Anybody have any stories about your kids?
This will be like a one at a time, right? Like, not everybody all at once.
Slow down, guys. Too much, too much.
I can tell one. My son was in therapy. His teacher thought he needed therapy, so he went to a therapist, and he spent an entire hour telling a therapist about how he was traumatized when our house burned down and his grandfather was bitten by a shark. And the therapist thoroughly believed his confabulation, and neither of those things ever happened. But he spent an entire hour telling the story. He was fully bought in on it.
That's quite the story. There's a part later on where we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Okay, so when our children confabulate, he was talking about how there's always a meaning behind the behavior. When our kids are really stressed out or very anxious, their ability to reason and remember goes down. So this can cause them to confabulate even more because it makes their memories more and more difficult to access. Not very long ago, I had a meeting with a client and we were we'd already gone over this curriculum. And I asked her a question and she started answering it. She said, Shaylee, I'm confabulating. I don't remember. But I'm trying to answer your question. So I'm just trying to fill in the blanks in my brain. And so our kids do that too. And we need to be mindful of when that happens and why. Now, if we were doing this curriculum and the guy in that video didn't say, intentional thought out lying never happens. If I said, kids never lie, it's all confabulation, they would never lie. You guys would all leave this meeting right now and not listen to another word that I said, because our kids too lie sometimes. It's not always confabulation. Our kids and even adults can lie for a number of reasons. Sometimes our kids lie to avoid punishment. Sometimes they lie to deflect blame. And sometimes it's to avoid feeling guilt or shame. I could tell you a story about why one of my kids has lied for each of those reasons. And I'm sure you guys can think of them too. For many children who have experienced trauma, loss, abuse, or neglect, lying becomes a critical skill that they need to survive. If you guys were here for the training that my boss, Stacey Thomas, did back in the summer, she would call lying a strategy. Our kids use lying as a strategy to get their needs met sometimes. It can take a very, very long time for our kids to unlearn this skill. So you might be wondering, why is my child lying all the time? They might lie because they're trying to please you with what they think you want to hear. I have a child who does this. She will tell me what she thinks I want to hear. Like the story that someone shared a minute ago, to get attention with a good story. So I have a son who is a storyteller. He tells some stories. And before I lived in Florida, I wouldn't have believed this, but I had to ask him if it was true or false the other day. He says, Mom, I was outside and there was a snake and then there was an alligator under the trampoline. And I thought, like, there's no way, but this is Florida, so maybe there is a way. So I asked him, okay, buddy, is this the truth or is this a story? And I gave him the opportunity to tell me if he was telling the truth or if he was telling a story. I didn't call it a lie. I called it a story. And he said, oh, it's a story. And I said, okay, this is a really good story. Keep telling me. And I do this. I give my kids the opportunity to tell the story because I think of it like this. If they were in a creative writing class and they were writing this story, we would be so impressed with their imaginations. So if we've established this is not the truth, my son that I'm talking about today, by the way, then keep telling me the story. Sometimes our kids have trouble remembering the truth, so they fill in the blanks, like my client a few weeks ago. They may have trouble thinking in a logical way, and they might really believe the lies that they are telling you. So let's think about a time when your child has lied to you, not confabulation, just lied to you. What might the underlying reason be? I will share my story first. I love plants. They bring me so much joy. I have plants everywhere. One of my kids in the summer, she is a collector of things. She loves to make things out of anything. Well, she took my huge pot of aloe and dumped it out on the side where I couldn't see it. So I'm sitting outside and I look over and my giant pot of aloe is on the ground. Nobody cared about my aloe. They just threw it on the ground. So I said, hey, child of mine that I won't name in this training, what happened with the aloe here? And she tells a story about what happened with the aloe. I knew it was not true. I knew it wasn't true. So I said, okay, I want you to sit right here for a minute and think about this. And then I'm going to ask you again, and I need you to tell me the truth. And so she sat there and my heart was broken because, guys, this was like such good aloe. And I give her a minute and then I asked her to tell me what really happened. And she told me that she found a lizard and it needed a home. And she thought this pot is big enough that it won't be able to climb out of it. And so in her brain, this was a really good idea. And she lied because she knew that she was going to get in trouble for it. But the underlying reason wasn't that she was trying to break my heart by ruining my aloe. The underlying reason was she's very resourceful and she wanted to give this lizard a home. So people always ask, what was the consequence? She had to replant my aloe, and it's actually doing just fine right now. Do you guys have any stories that you would like to share about a time that your kid has lied to you, and what might the underlying reason have been? Anybody?
I mean, I can go all night long, but I have a lot of children. So I had a teenager one time who was young adult, actually, supposed to be finding a job. And, you know, I'm trying. And so she told me she had gone to an open interview. And I didn't think much about it. I thought that's really good progress. You went to an open interview. And I didn't find out until later that she went. The line was really long. And so she left. But she never actually interviewed. But she did go to the open interview. So
Yeah, so in a way, she told you the truth. She went, she just didn't follow through with what she was supposed to do there. Yeah, but the meaning behind the behavior was there was a really long line and it might have felt intimidating and scary. And so she just glided on out of there. Anybody else have a story? I know I'm not the only person whose children are not always truthful.
Yeah, we can share. I have a homeschool student who is a sophomore in high school who usually excels on his own. He's very much independent and was lying that he was getting his work done and it was great and easy. And then when it came time to start doing the checks, he just was completely not doing it. Emotionally broke down. It wasn't just lying to lie or being lazy. It was because he truly didn't understand it and was too embarrassed to ask for help.
That is a really good example. Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else? Okay. Negative behaviors like lying begin with a scared child. So we have to increase our kids' sense of felt safety, just like that story that she just shared. That kid was a good student, but he didn't understand. He was too embarrassed. He didn't, in that situation, feel quite safe enough to ask the question. As a reminder, I talked about this last month, but if you weren't here last month, felt safety has nothing to do with us actually physically being safe and everything to do with if we feel safe. So if a child doesn't feel safe, they don't have a sense of felt safety. I had mentioned this to Jody before we started because this is something that I remind my husband of, I remind myself of pretty frequently. If we head straight for the reasoning part of the brain with the expectation of learning, it will not work out well if a child is dysregulated and disconnected from others. The brilliant Bruce Perry said that. So what do we do? How do we reason with our children? We have to take a bottom-up approach. The first thing we have to do is regulate. We must help the child regulate and calm their fight, flight, or freeze responses. If we jump right to reasoning and our child is dysregulated, nothing will be accomplished. Next, we need to relate. So I have a high schooler, and high school is hard. Being a high school girl is hard. Recently, she came to me really distraught and dysregulated over something. And what would have been easiest for me to do would have been to just try to reason with her because I was there once. I know what it's like, but she wasn't going to hear that. She was so dysregulated. So first I helped her regulate. Okay, let's go for a walk, or let's go to Sonic and get something to drink. Help them regulate, and then we can relate. I remember what it's like to be a high school girl, and sometimes it really stunk. And then we can reason. But we cannot try to reason without first regulating or helping regulate, then relating, then we can reason. So I can't do a training without sharing something from Karen Purvis. How do I handle lying?
There's a developmental stage at about 4 to 6 where kids are going to explore the truth. If the child didn't go through a normal developmental sequence at 4 to 6, they may explore it much older. So you may bring home an adolescent who's never had the normal developmental trajectory, and they may explore the boundaries of the truth. So a first thing to bear in mind is that exploring the parameters of what's really true is part of the developmental sequence. A second thing to remember is you need to be thinking about your own example, because, for example, if your child picks up the phone and says, "Mom, it's so-and-so," and you say, "Tell her I'm not home," it's going to be really pretty hard for you to hold your child accountable to a high level of truth. A third thing to bear in mind is the purposes of misbehavior. There's always a reason and a purpose. There's always a function for misbehavior for us as well as for our children. For a child of any age, a misbehavior has either a conscious or an unconscious purpose, a goal in mind. So I have to explore as a caregiver, as a parent, does my child believe they have to lie to get this need met? Or is my child fearful of my reactivity? Have I been overreactive in the past? So if you bear in mind now, that does not mean we don't address the behavior. It simply means that we address it with balance and insight. So those three things, and then a final thing is my goal is to teach my child skills for life. And honest communication with trust and integrity is obviously a goal for life. So I might say to a child, a young child who's telling me a story, "Sweetie, is that real or pretend?" And they might be able to recalibrate as we redefine real and pretend. I might be able to say something clever and humorous like, "Really? Wow. Do you want to think about that and try it again?" I might even give a child time to think about it, say, "You know, that isn't what I thought I saw happen. Would you like to go think about it for a little while and come back to me when you've had a chance to think about it and tell me what you think really happened?" So my goal is a balance of structure and nurture. I'm going to address any misbehavior, but I want to do it in the context of balance. It's really important as parents look for how to help their children develop long-term strategies for integrity in their relationships with each other, with family members and God. It's really important for us to remember that we want to celebrate the good and not have joy in, "Aha, I caught you." Okay. We're taught by Scripture, by the heart of God, that God rejoices and that God's love rejoices in the good. It doesn't rejoice in evil. So let your child see your joy in helping them succeed. My experience with children who tell stories and outright lies is that when they understand, I'm here to help you succeed, I'm going to work with you, you need to work with me. Let's work this out together. That a child will come forward to tell the truth.
I think we all want to be that for our kids. We want to be a safe place. We want to help them through it. Sometimes parents do find joy in, I caught you. I knew you were lying. But we need to help our kids work through that process. Why are you lying? Why did you feel like you needed to lie? What are some practical steps that we can take when our kids are lying? Let's try really hard to focus on reducing stress and anxiety and preventing upset. A child that feels safe and secure is better able to remember things and think through a problem. Don't address the fact that their memory of events is wrong, but focus on making a plan moving forward. So Karen Purvis just in that video said, really, well, that's not quite how I remembered it. It's okay to say that. One of my kids has had this memory of visiting her biological mom, and she shares this story. She used to share this story about just how perfect her house was, and in her brain, everything was just amazing. And my kids were removed from a not amazing situation. So I wouldn't think of that as lying, but it was a situation where I talked through it. Well, tell me about that. I was curious. Tell me a little bit more about the kitchen. What was the living room like? And staying curious sometimes can help our kids work through things that they believe. Remind yourself why your child confabulates. It's a very normal thing to do, to fill in the blanks. The last one makes me laugh because I'm pretty sure we've probably all done this. I know I've done this. Don't ask your child why they are lying. In my experience, 10 out of 10 times, they're not going to tell you why they're lying if you say, why are you lying? When they're lying and they ask, or you ask, they are working out of their primitive brain, and they probably won't be able to answer this question, and they likely won't answer it in a truthful way anyway. Before I knew better, I would ask my kid, why are you lying to me? And one of my children would go into what I call their trauma shell. They just shut down, and they no longer had access to their words or anything else because they just shut down. So what won't help when our kids are lying? Demanding the truth. It won't help. We probably won't get the truth, and it'll possibly make them continue the lie just because they're in their fear brain. It will not help if we set a rule of no lying, because our precious, wonderful children are still going to lie sometimes. So when we set a rule of no lying, we're kind of setting them up for failure. Saying that we won't punish our kids, but then our tone of voice and physical posture says otherwise, that's not going to help. So if I have a really flat affect and I am using my angry voice and I say, if you just tell me the truth, you won't get in trouble. You're not going to tell me the truth because you don't trust that you're really not going to be in trouble. All right, parents of teenagers, this is a good one for you.
Sometimes kids lie because they don't know that we know something already. So we catch them in it and we're so proud of ourselves. You know, I already know that this happened, or I already saw that on your phone and I saw that you did something that was horrible. And so I ask you, have you ever done this, or did you get it done, or did you hand it in? So whether it's I saw something on your phone that was inappropriate and I am kind of hedging around to see if you'll admit to it, or whether I ask if the report got turned in and I already know it didn't. When we think that we've caught our teens in a lie, what we've actually done is set them up for the lie. And when we say that's not very truthful of them, what we really have to recognize is we're the one that started the untruth in the first place. We're the ones that set it up as something that it really wasn't. So instead of entrapment, let's just be really honest with them. If we saw something, wouldn't it be better if they learned that being able to face that conflict directly is the way to move through that conflict? And when we try to hedge around it because we're a little embarrassed that we found out something that maybe we shouldn't have known. So for instance, let's say we saw something on their phone. I saw something on your phone. It might feel like a violation of your privacy. It concerns me. So the honesty around that is, I'm going to face this for your well-being rather than my fear. And I'm not going to hedge around as if it's an embarrassing thing for both of us. I'm going to face it directly so that it will be less embarrassing for you. So when we face it directly, it gives them an opportunity to be more honest about it. Now, of course, you know, if you saw something that was really embarrassing, their first response will be, you shouldn't have been looking at I can't trust you with anything. All of that stuff. And what you're going to do is you're going to let that wash by, and then you're going to say, I hope that you're really hearing what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I'm concerned for your well-being. I'm concerned for your safety in this. And it's important that you have an honest conversation with somebody about where this is going, because it seems like it's heading into some murky water. If it's because they didn't hand something in, then you say, I'm concerned about how these reports are getting handed in. You called her. Don't be in my stuff all the time. Don't be in my business all the time. It's my job to make sure that you are going to be a sturdy, responsible human being, and I'm going to do my job, even when it feels like a violation sometimes. I am going to pay attention to when that is a violation, and in this place, it seems as if you got a little over your head in this one. So when we approach it honestly, they have more of an opportunity to be honest. Don't entrap your son or your daughter. Don't do it. Be honest.
I think that I love that video because it's such a good reminder. Just say what you know. Don't beat around the bush. Don't try to catch them in a lie. Hey, are you following all the rules on your phone? If you know that they're not, address it head on. Hey, I looked at your phone and I saw this. Let's talk about it. We want to make sure that we stay connected in those moments, especially with our teenagers, because as she said, they're not going to be happy about it. But it's not beneficial if we beat around the bush and wait for them or ask them a question when we already know the answer to the question.
Hey, Shaylee, I have a question.
Yes.
So we definitely, have heard the whole, like, don't invite them into a lie. Like, if we know something, you don't ask the question. And so I had actually a very similar situation recently with one of my kiddos where it's like, we knew. And so I did approach directly and said, I know that, and talked about the circumstance and did not invite into a lie. And the kiddo still lied. Like, the first word out of her mouth wasn't, I can't believe you, da, 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 da. It was like, that didn't happen. And so, I was able to show, and still there was like, so, what I guess what she's saying is the follow-up is still, I'm concerned, or it's my job, you still just kind of move forward. But I was surprised, I gotta say, when it's like, when you're direct and you don't invite a lie, and then I still got a lie.
Yeah. So I'm curious, not to put you on the spot, but how did you handle that after your child lied about it when you were presenting them with the truth?
I think I was trying to think about it. I hope I'm not confabulating my response, because I had a feeling you were going to ask about that. But I think I just sort of acknowledged, like, this puts us in a tricky spot, doesn't it, when it comes to being able to trust each other? Because here I am showing you the thing that I'm concerned about, and you're maintaining a posture of saying that it didn't happen. And so that's hard for both of us, right? And just left it at that. So.
And you are right. That is hard for both of you. So if you can truthfully say, listen, I want to have a conversation with you. No one's in trouble, but we need to talk about this. Sometimes I find with my kids, if I start with no one's in trouble, then it kind of relaxes them and gives them that felt safety. Now I can't say no one's in trouble, but my body language and voice say otherwise. I would also say, if it involved the phone, I would say, you know what, I'm going to hang on to your phone for a few minutes. I want you to think about it, and then we're going to talk about this again in a few minutes. And I would like to try this again where you just tell me the truth. One thing that I do with my kids every single time they tell me a lie is, once we get to the truth, we circle all the way back around and we go through the whole scenario in a truthful way. If it's my 7-year-old or if it's my 15-year-old, we're gonna do it the truthful way. And our kids learn through doing things the right way. And it takes lots and lots of repetition. But my kids are so used to it that they will, I may have shared this with you guys last month, but one of my kids not long ago slammed the door and then opens it and says, I'm going to try that again the right way, because they know I'm always coming behind them and we're going to do it the right way. And lying is no different. Okay, practical strategies that we can use. I love this slide and I love that I can use it in this group. Praying. a lot of times we forget that really amazing tool that we have. Let's pray. Let's pray that the Holy Spirit convicts our kids' hearts, because ultimately it is the Holy Spirit who convicts and can change our kids' hearts. Let's teach our kids that God is truthful, but we don't want to do it in a shaming way, because that can have a different impact on our kids than we're hoping for. And then memorize scripture and meditate on it in really hard times. Model truth telling, even when it's costly. I love the Karen Purvis example of somebody calls, tell her I'm not here. It's so great because my mom used to do that all the time. We don't have to do that anymore. We have cell phones. We know who's calling. Nobody answers their phone if they don't, sometimes even if they know who it is. But model truth telling, even when it's costly. If you make a bad choice or maybe a mistake that you didn't mean to make, be honest about it. Our kids are always watching. Make sure you're talking to your kids, not just in the moment of lying, but all the time about how telling the truth is really important. My kids love playing 2 truths and a lie. And I think it's fun too. I did it in a training last week and it was really fun to try to figure out, okay, here, what's the lie here? But when you do things like that outside of the moment, then you're able to have these conversations. Okay, that was a really good lie, but we don't do that outside of this table in this game. If your kids struggle with telling the truth, praise them when they do. And that sounds kind of odd, right? Like, well, they're finally telling the truth and I'm supposed to praise them. Yes, because what gets praised gets repeated. And it doesn't have to be a party and a celebration after they tell the truth. It can be, thank you for telling me the truth. That was really hard. And I'm proud of you for telling me the truth in that situation. Remember that it might take a while for these changes to set in, especially for kids who have brain differences. And most of us, probably all of us on this call, have kids who have brain differences. Learning honesty can be a really long process. So don't be surprised if you make a little bit of progress and then your child backslides. And then you make some progress and then they backslide. That happens. It doesn't mean that we give up. It doesn't mean that we say, oh, this method doesn't actually work, because they're not telling the truth all the time now. We keep trying. Remember, it's really important to be non-threatening. When I was a kid, we're going to talk about this more in a second, but when I was a kid, lying was one of the worst things that you could do. And so if my parents, they didn't approach me in a kind way, when they would approach me in a threatening way, you're lying, here's the consequence, you're probably going to end up in prison and all of these things because you just lied about taking the last cookie. We don't want to be that way. We want to be non-threatening. We want to show understanding about how our kids are feeling inside. If our child is lying because they're feeling a certain way and they're embarrassed about it, we want to be a safe place, and we want our kids to know that we love them. We want to hear what they have to say about whatever's going on. And we always want to look beneath the behavior. So there's always meaning behind behavior, even our own. So consider these questions. Does your child maybe have a low self-esteem? Are they trying really hard to impress? I think that most of us have probably seen our kids lie to their peers before to try to impress them, or we've been lied to by our peers who are trying to impress us. Does your child maybe feel like they don't measure up, so they have to lie? I have a client whose son tells stories about like having the best, latest model iPhone at home. Well, he doesn't. But he says that at school because he wants to measure up. He wants to fit in. And that's why he tells this lie. Does your child maybe fear harsh consequences? What has happened in the past when they've lied? Are they afraid that that might happen again? Do they fear rejection by you or having you be greatly disappointed in them? Do you maybe have unreasonably high standards that they can't meet? Do they think, if I tell the truth, you might not love me anymore? And some of our kids really do think that way. So when we think about some of these things maybe being the underlying cause, I think it can give us a little bit more compassion. Regulated, connected kids who feel safe and know what to do behave well. So just a reminder, regulation and connection are the keys. All right, now you guys, I want you to think as we're going through the next couple of slides. How does lying affect you? If you don't unmute, please have a conversation with someone in the room with you, if there's someone in the room with you. How does lying affect you? Some people are more sensitive about being lied to than others, and often it's because of when they were kids. Did someone in your past lie to you repeatedly? I once had a client who had an ex-husband who lied all the time. And so when her son started lying about very small things, her brain automatically went to, he's going to end up like my ex-husband because he's doing this. That was the meaning behind her reaction. And this might affect how you respond to a child who's not telling the truth. So it's really important to think about, okay, I'm a little harsh in my responses. Why is that? So think back to a time when your child has lied or confabulated. How did you react, and how would you react differently now? In addition to this question, I want you to really think about and share, if you're willing, how lying affects you. How does it make you feel? Are you someone who can be lied to and it's not a big deal? Or does it make you just angry when your kids lie? You don't have to say it out loud, but I'd like for you to say it to someone. If you do want to say it out loud, I'd love to hear you.
For me, I get angry, and when it's one of my foster kids, I feel like it's my personal failure that they can, especially if they're lying about something at school, turning their homework in, and oh, I didn't do that. It was somebody else that flipped off the bus driver, and we had to pull a videotape and say, no, it was you. Here's you flipping off the bus driver after 2 hours of, I didn't do it. So I feel like it's a personal failure. I take it probably far more seriously than I should. But I
don't think you're alone in that. I think that as parents, a lot of us take that as a personal failure. The situation about the bus driver, that is a situation where I would circle back around to, okay, we pulled the video. We know that it's you. All right, buddy, listen, we're going to go through the whole story again. I want you to tell me what happened in a truthful way. An important part of that is once your child tells you the truth, you move on. We don't camp out here. Once they tell the truth, we're done. Anybody else have a story that you'd like to share? Situation?
I'd say for us, this is such a big one because our kids are teenagers. And so we're looking at, like, you're going to be driving a car soon, or, there are going to be situations where you're out with friends and we're not with you. And so really emphasizing with them truth telling and us trusting you and you trusting us is so foundational, because you're getting ready to do really big things that could have big consequences. And so we have to practice the little things at home.
I appreciate that you said practice. You do have to practice.
Yeah, so I totally understand. And very often, like, there's not necessarily a consequence. Like you said, it's like, we want to talk through this. We want to practice telling it the right way. Okay, yay, great job. Let's move on. I think our struggle is when there's a repeated pattern of not telling the truth. Not necessarily like we're going to take your phone or you're grounded or you have to go to bed early. There's not like a consequence, but helping them understand there ultimately is a consequence of, we're not sure that we can trust you to get your license, and some of those kinds of like bigger things. And at what point have you earned back that trustworthiness? And that's a hard one to answer, I think.
That is a hard one. That is a hard one. And I think that it's important to go back to parenting the stage, not the age. If you have a 16-year-old who isn't developmentally or isn't in a place where you trust them to drive a car, it's okay to let them wait until it is safe for them to do that. Thank you for sharing, Jody. Anybody else have something that they'd like to share? So Kim knows this, but at Chosen, we wait the awkward 7 seconds for someone to say something. I'm really bad at it. I always fill the 7 seconds with my own voice. So I'm going to try. I'm going to give you guys 2 seconds. Anybody else want to share? Okay, we'll move on. So we want to try to be aware of how our past experiences and traumas affect our feelings. Pay attention to your own body and how you are reacting to lying. What does your facial expression show? If you work with me at Chosen, we've probably talked about mirror neurons. What is your affect? Is your affect flat? Just tell me the truth. You won't be in trouble. You trust me if I have a flat affect? Or listen, just tell me the truth. You're not going to be in trouble. I want to talk through this with you. You're going to feel safer with me if I don't have a flat affect. Are you clenching your teeth? Some of us do that. Do you immediately raise your voice when you suspect your child is lying? These responses from you can further cause escalation in your child, which can increase their effort to keep up the lie. I can tell you guys that this is so true in my own family. Before I knew better, I approached this in the very wrong way, and it always escalated. It always became a really big deal, and it would drag out, and it was just awful for everyone. But now I address it head on. We get to the truth, we retell the story, and we move on. And it doesn't take that long, where before it might take us an hour to work through this. We can do it in 2 minutes and we're done. And approaching it in a different way, my kids don't lie to me that often. Sometimes they do, but it's not as often as they used to, because they know that I'm a safe place. They know that they can tell me the truth. Now, sometimes they do still lie. The aloe story wasn't that long ago. All right. So I can't see your names to see who's talking, but whoever a few minutes ago shared about feeling like a failure as a mom made me think of this part of the curriculum. We as parents feel tremendous social pressure to discipline lying. And the way that the world thinks that we should discipline lying, the non-PBRI connected parenting world, is harsh discipline. A lie needs a harsh consequence. Family and friends who don't understand children with brain differences, or who don't know that our children have brain differences, may feel like we're letting our kids get away with bad behavior. So I want you guys to listen to this and remember, you don't owe anyone an explanation for how you are parenting your kids. If you are questioned, and you may be, you can do one of the following things. You can walk away and ignore what they've said. You can tell them it's private. I don't want to talk about that. This is just our choice. You do not have to explain your parenting style, just like we don't expect a traditional parenting style to explain to us why they parent that way. You can say that you are happy to talk to them away from your child at a later time, and you can educate people privately about kids with brain differences and why we have to parent in a different way. We cannot control other people's actions, but we can control our reactions. Though it can be hard, because sometimes we want to go into mama bear or papa bear mode, but we can control our reactions. Their response will likely depend on if they know that our kids have a trauma history or brain difference. It's really hard for a lot of people to recognize that our kids are not developmentally and neurotypically, or aren't like their neurotypical classmates or friends. I have 4 kids who have trauma backgrounds. One of them has a visible brain injury, so he has a big scar on his head. He gets a lot more compassion and grace from people than my other kids who don't have a physical brain injury. But all of my kids have brain differences. It's really important that we don't share our kids' private information with people who don't need to know it. I talked about this last month, but we can say, you know, trauma impacts the brain and he struggles in different ways. And we are parenting in the best way that we can to help him grow and heal. So, a reminder, you don't have to explain it. You don't have to. And people will question, people will think, I hear when I start working with people, isn't this permissive parenting? It's absolutely not permissive parenting. It's not. We don't allow disrespect. We don't allow our kids to lie. We get to the bottom of it in a connected way. So here we go again. I get furious when my teen lies to me.
When a teen lies, it's possible that they're just trying to get out of trouble. There's also a possibility that they're not sure that you're going to be able to handle the news that is true. So when you find that they lie about something like being at a party and something happens, their fear is that you will just so blow off the planet about that it will become a bigger disaster than it would have been if they had just handled it themselves. So our responsibility for teens is to really build a foundation where they can trust that we're going to be steady, that we're going to listen to it. And this is really, really hard because every parent of a teenager knows their life is hanging by a thread. Anything could go wrong and they could drop into the ravine. So what we want is to make sure that nothing bad could touch them, and yet they live in a world where lots of things can go wrong, and their job is to figure out how to navigate through that, how to manage that. And so let's say that you found out that there was drinking someplace where there shouldn't have been, and you find out later and they never said it, and you feel like that's been a big betrayal of the trust between you. You didn't tell me that this was happening. I had to hear it from somebody else. One of the reasons that they might not have admitted to that, and again, there are lies that are very direct and there are just lies of omission. You know, well, I never said there wasn't drinking. So the lies of omission tend to be more about, you won't listen to this, or you won't trust me through this. You will assume something that I know wasn't true about this. So there's got to be some level within us where we can step back and say, I'm willing to hear this story out. And this is where we come back to that whole curiosity piece. I'd like to know your side of this, your take on it. What is it that you experienced in that? How did you see people making wiser choices than other people? How did that work for them? So what might you do if you were in that circumstance the next time? They will trust us to manage the conflicts they experience if we show the ability to walk through that conflict situation and listen to it, hear it, and help guide them through it.
So she said, she was talking about being curious. A couple of my coworkers use the term, stay curious, not furious. So if we ask questions about, okay, you were there, what were other people doing? What could we have done? Maybe what you didn't have in place was a code word that they could text you to leave. But being curious and asking questions instead of just being furious and cutting them off and not letting them talk will not gain their trust in a way that they will feel comfortable talking to us about those hard things. Okay, so the next steps. We have to create physical and emotional margin in our lives in order to respond to our child in a nice, connected way. Everybody talks about self-care, but it's true. If you don't have that margin, you won't be able to respond in the way that I've talked to you about tonight. Because when we don't have margin, we snap about everything. We have to learn to stay regulated ourselves. So if our child lies to us and we start to get dysregulated, it is perfectly okay to say, I'm feeling dysregulated right now. We need to talk about this in a little bit. Understand how your past affects your present. Think about your childhood. Think about a past relationship or an adult child or whatever it may be, and figure out why you respond the way you do. Be consistent. Remember, it is not a one and done thing. It is over and over and over again. And we want to stay connected. When we are connected with our kids, they are willing to talk to us. They are willing to tell us the truth. Maybe not the first time. We might have to circle back around to it. But if we are connected, we are going to get to that point. Now, when I start working with families, this is a question that I get asked often. Okay, this is great, but how long do I have to parent this way?
A most common question that we hear over and over again, no matter where we go, is how long do I have to do this stuff? It's wearing me out. This has taken every ounce of energy that I've got. Well, again, I'm going to ask you to think developmental model. When you have a newborn, you expect to give up sleep for a period of time. You just know babies wake up at 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. and 6 a.m. And you know it's part of parenting a child developmentally. When you have a newborn in your home, you understand that your lifestyle will be dramatically changed. That over time, you'll get a little more sleep and then a little more sleep. And over time, you might go back to part of a regular schedule, but you understand that those early years are high investment. We're talking about a way of relationship that meets the deepest needs of every child and a human of any age. We all have the same needs. We need to know that we're precious. We need to know that we're loved. We need to know how to get our needs met appropriately. We need to know how to find safe people. We need to know that we have a voice. We need to know that our life and that our pain and that our fears and that our wants matter. This is the stuff of humanity. I believe relationship parenting that's based in trust is a new lifestyle. I believe it's not really new at all, but I believe it's going back to the heart of God. It's a new kind of normal for our families, but it's going to be based on my child has a need. My God-given privilege is to meet that need, and I'm here for that. We tell parents it is pay me now or pay me later. We can invest in our children very early, and then over time they become more and more independent and more self-sufficient. Or we can keep pushing them away and doing more traditional things that don't meet those deep needs developmentally, and they cannot mature. They cannot develop, and they cannot become all that God's created them to be. It's just a new normal. It's, I believe, a normal that's the heart of God. I always think God so loved that he gave, everything that was dear to him, everything that was precious to him. The ultimate sacrifice is God's kind of parenting.
So I often call this type of parenting investment parenting. It's not we're going to do this one time and everything will be better. It takes a long time. And sometimes we don't see change right away, and it feels really, really hard. Karen Purvis was talking about infants and we meet their needs over and over and over. I heard recently that babies who have their needs consistently met cry 150 to 200,000 times in the first year of life. And we expect that. And we meet those needs. But when our kids get older, we kind of expect that we shouldn't have to continue to try, but we do. And that's what ultimately gets results with our kids. So that is it for me. But if you guys have any questions, I would be happy to answer them. I'm
I'll ask you
giving
a
the,
question. It's calmed down a little bit in my house, so I think I can talk. So you talked a lot about like teenagers and lying and talking with them, but what about when you're dealing with like a 3-year-old that, you know, like you said, there's developmental where they're learning to stretch the truth and that's normal. So how would you go about a conversation with a 3-year-old about really understanding why they're lying, whether it's because of the trauma they came from, whether they're confabulating, whatever it is, to be able to discuss that with so young of an age of a child?
so for a 3-year-old, I would just circle around and have them tell me the truth. And if you can't say, try that again the right way, or try that again by telling the truth, you can say what the truth is and have them repeat that when they're that little. But when they're 3, remember, totally developmentally appropriate. So we want to help them get through that, but there's no reason to punish a 3-year-old for lying because it's developmentally appropriate and they don't understand. They're just trying. They're just pushing those boundaries. What can I get away with here?
Yeah, I think it's more like helping her process like what really happened and being like understanding this, not severity, but like how the things she lies about are big things that I think she's just creating in her head sometimes.
Yeah.
So it's more of like, when you say these things, we need to know what really happened for your safety is kind of the way I try and explain it to her. But
Yeah.
for her little brain, there's a lot that's gone on. So trying to help her like differentiate of the truth and not the truth and why that matters so much. So it's not about like the punishing piece of it, just more for
Okay.
her.
Yeah, I would have the conversation with her and tell her what the truth is. If you know what the truth is, tell her what the truth is without saying, that's not the truth, you're lying. Not that I think that you would say it that way, but just tell her what the truth is. And when you hear her saying the truth, praise her for telling the truth. She won't understand at 3 how what she says might impact her. So just focus more on telling the truth and praising the truth and stay curious. Something that I've learned is if you're curious and you ask a lot of questions, if they're telling a lie, they can't keep it up for too long. That was a great question. Thank you. Pam, did I see your hand? You're muted.
My hand did go up, but didn't have anything really to say other than you've done a really great job. And I don't know how you do it with none of us participating. I sit here, I'm listening, I'm like, and then you ask a question, I'm like, oh, my brain goes blank. So it's like, but anyway, you did a really great job as always. Thanks.
Thank you, Pam. And thank you for coming. I know this is not a new topic to you, so I appreciate you coming.
Hey, it's always good for the reminders.
I agree, even for myself.
Yeah, exactly.
Hi, I had a question. So with children who have been diagnosed with fetal alcohol, is that with the confabulation, like in the video that was shown, like our little one is still a baby. So I'm just trying to, in the future, is this something that eventually you'll be able to practice to where they will start to understand that? Or is that something that could potentially be like just a lifelong struggle for them?
I think that if you start practicing when they're younger, they'll catch on quicker. I don't think that it necessarily means because they have been diagnosed with FASD that it will be a lifelong struggle. But from my experience, if we start teaching the right way early on, it becomes normal to them.
Okay.
All right. Anybody else?
Okay. Well, Shaylee, thank you so much. You did do such a great job, and the content I know for me was really good to hear and got me thinking differently about some things. So thanks for spending your evening with us. Those of you that participated tonight, I did throw a survey link into the chat. If you're able to just take, it's 3 questions. It goes by really, really quickly. So if you are willing to click that, answer those 3 questions, that lets us know that the content is meaningful to you, that it's helpful. And honestly, it helps us continue to be able to offer these trainings for free, as we're able to use the outcome of those surveys to communicate to donors and others who want to see us continue to be able to help families. So it gives us good feedback. It helps us know we're on the right track. And it helps us to be able to offer these programs to you on an ongoing basis. So thank you for taking the time to do that. I will also include that survey link in a follow-up email to you all. And we'll also include the 5K flyer, the discount code, and then I will also include information about Chosen. As a partner, Bridge Life is able to make referrals on your behalf to Chosen, and we need just a little bit of information from you. So if this sparked your interest and you're wondering if they might be able to help your family in a more ongoing and meaningful way by meeting regularly, we would love to be able to connect you with them. And so look for that information in the email as well. But for tonight, we'll call it good. We'll let you guys out of here a little bit early. And Shaylee, again, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me. And if you guys have any questions that you didn't feel like asking in this setting, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. My very long name, Shaylee at chosen.care, or you can just go to chosen.care and find my bio and find my email there. Might be a little bit easier.
Shaylee, I will, since you offered that, I will throw your email in my follow-up email as well. So.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you guys for having me. I always enjoy my time with you.
Thank you so much. Have a great night, everybody.